What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam Thrash. I'm your host over here at Fall Obsession Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. This week, my guest is a gentleman named Brett Rousselle. He is known as the Backcountry Bow Hunter. That's where you can find him on social media and everything. But his latest bow hunting experience is one for the record books for sure. He went to Russia on a brown bear hunt. He has never hunted bear before in his life, and a brown bear was number one on the bucket list. He looked into the Alaska hunts and everything like that, ended up switching gears, and there's a whole story that he tells that goes with all this, but ended up switching gears and going to Russia to pursue his number one bucket list dream of killing a big brown bear and pulled it off, of course. So incredible story, very inspiring, very passionate gentleman, passionate about hunting and the outdoors. And I was inspired for sure by this conversation that I have with him and getting to hear about this incredible adventure and experience that he just had. So hope you guys enjoy this episode. Before we get there, though, Fall Obsession Podcast is brought to you guys in partnership with Hoot Camo. First experience I had rocking Hoot gear was actually in eastern Colorado on our flatland deer country hunt. Really love the patterns. The gear holds up phenomenally, very durable, very versatile, very warm in cold weather. That's important. So if you guys are looking to get into some high quality outdoor gear, I recommend that you guys go check out Hoot Camo. And even if you don't pick up any actual hunting gear right now, if you just want to pick up some of their fishing wear for the summer or everyday casual wear, you can use the code Fall Obsession 15 at checkout, and that's going to save you some money on that next order. So hootcamo.com. The Outdoor Call Radio app is another podcast partner. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV. He created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. You will catch Fall Obsession podcast playing on that loop on Mondays. That's the same day as our new publications, as well as tons of other hunting shows and podcasts that we all know and love. So go download the Outdoor Call Radio app today. It is free. You can start streaming immediately, and go follow Outdoors Dan on social media. He does a couple of different live radio shows a couple different times a week, and he shares those broadcasts on his Facebook Live if you're not local to those radio stations in the Midwest. So go follow Outdoors Dan and go download the Outdoor Call Radio app. Elite Archery is another Fall Obsession partner. Been shooting an elite bow for several years, and I love everything about them. They are, in my opinion, the most shootable bow on the market today. But the only way that you're going to know that is if you go try it. So I encourage everybody to go to your local elite dealer and take the Elite Shootability Challenge, especially if you haven't shot an elite bow lately or at all. Technology changes very quickly in the archery industry. So that's why I always say that if it's been a minute since you had an elite bow in your hand, you should go check out what they got going on right now, because they are, in my opinion, one of the best bows that you're going to buy. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is also a podcast partner. Derek Eves over there in Mississippi, he books hunts with vetted outfitters across the country. So if you're looking to book that next experience, perhaps your own once in a lifetime bucket list hunt that you've been saving up for, then give Derek a call. He'll work with you on all the details and find something that works for you. Ridge Rock Hunt Company, go check them out. Finally, thank you guys again for tuning in to another Fall Obsession podcast. Be sure that you are following Fall Obsession on all the major social media platforms. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe and follow this podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. We are on all the major podcast apps, as well as Carbon TV, Waypoint TV, and the podcast episodes are also on our YouTube channel. Go to the website fallobsession.com. Check out everything that we have going on over there, and maybe pick you up some apparel or something like that. Support a small-time hunting brand. We always appreciate it. That's all I got. We're heading over to our episode with Brett. Thank you guys for listening. This is another Fall Obsession podcast episode.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam, hosting you guys once again. My guest this week is Brett Rousselle, the backcountry bow hunter. Welcome to our show, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm super excited, man. I've been looking you up on social media and following your journey and checking out one experience with your recent bear hunt for sure that we want to talk about on here today. Pretty cool stuff. But for our listeners, for people who don't know who you are, you want to take just a minute to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, what you hunt.
Yeah, so Brett Rousselle. Love to bow hunt. Want to bow hunt everything there is. I live in Kansas, so I grew up cutting my teeth on whitetails, and I've had the chance to go to New Zealand and hunt red stag, and been all over the country hunting different critters. Been to South Texas going after axis deer, mule deer, elk out in the western states. And then here more recently, got to get the opportunity to go to Russia and bow hunt some brown bear. So yeah, I love to bow hunt. And then here recently, here in the last several months, we launched the clothing line as well, and we're just in the process of getting that up and going to get that up on its feet. So that's I guess that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Busy life for sure.
Yeah, staying busy. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned it, the Russian bear hunt, and that's obviously the big experience that I want to talk to you about on the show today. But have you, before this hunt, what kind of bear hunting experience did you have, if any, in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely zero. Yep, absolutely
Absolutely
zero.
zero.
So black bear's on my list, but it's just a little further down. Brown bear was right there at the top, and yeah, I got to look at my bucket list, and it's a long list, I suppose, like everybody else's. And I got to realize that, man, there's a chance that if I start at the bottom and work my way up, I may never make it to number one. I may run out of money, or I may be too old, or my health may go bad, or whatever. And so then I just kind of switched my plans up and thought, you know what, let's just start at the top of the list and then just start working my way down and see how far I get. So eventually I'll be going after black bear at some point. But it's a little further down. I've still got several other critters that I want to go after before a black bear. But yeah, I guess if you're gonna do it, go big or go home. So I started with about
Wow.
as big as bears you can get. So
Yeah, no doubt. What interested you in that? Why was that number one?
I have no idea. I mean, I know when I was a kid, and I don't know what age I was. I would say, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there probably. I remember and I don't know who it was. I know Fred Bear. I remember seeing him shoot a giant brown bear. I remember seeing Chuck Adams shoot a giant brown bear. And I remember seeing Jack Brittingham shoot a giant brown bear. I think those are kind of the first three. I don't remember who was first that I saw, but those were the first three that I remember. And, they all did it with a bow. And I just remember seeing pictures of them holding this giant paw up. And as a little boy, I was like, I want to do that someday. I don't know what the draw was. I don't know. I think there's obviously an element of danger in there, adventure. I don't know. All those things just kind of wrapped up into I'm gonna have to do that. And I think a lot of it too is just pushing your limits to find out what you're capable of. And you don't know what you're capable of until you push those limits and find out how far can I go? What's in a lot of different areas, your limits on strength. There's a lot of guys that do weightlifting and they test their limits as far as how much can I lift. Um, there's thrill seekers out there as far as adrenaline, like how far can I push my adrenaline? Like, can I hold it together if I'm face to face with a giant brown bear, with a bow in my hands? Like what, we all want to think that we can hold our composure together and that we can man up but you don't know until you try. And so I think there's an element of just wanting to push my own limits for my own sake and just see how far I can go and how far I can take it. And I've always been a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. So yeah, I suppose at an early age, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to do that at some point. And eventually I suppose at some point then I actually made an actual list and I'm like, yeah, that one's number one. Like, and it's right up there with an African lion. Like that's another one that I want to do. I'd say those two are neck and neck. I never wanted to put either one of them at number two. So they're both right there tied at number one. I think there's a little bit, if I think a cat might be a little more fear involved in that one if I was thinking about it, because I think you think of a cat, they're more agile. So Yeah, I mean, but again, a brown bear is just a lot larger in size. They both have their unique elements. So yeah, it was up there at number one, and at some point I just thought, you know what, let's just go for number one. And so I just zoned in on brown bear and started looking at Kodiak Island and the Alaskan Peninsula. And that's where I was really, looking at it first because that's at least all the hunts that I had seen people go on. That's typically where they're going. When I was
Right.
younger, it's like it's either Kodiak Island or the peninsula, and so I'm starting to zone in on that and do the research and look up outfitters, and I start making phone calls. At some point I eventually had some money in my account, and enough to start thinking about at least calling outfitters, and so I just start making a list and making notes and calling references, and you start looking at those hunts in Alaska and you're looking at 30,000 plus, and
Mhm.
there's no guarantee that you're going to come home with one. It's hunting, it's not killing, it's hunting. And so I'm like, man, I've got the money. It's not that I don't have the money, but I just kept thinking, what if I don't kill one? Like that, it's like that's a chunk of change. That's gonna be a long plane flight on the way home to just
Yeah.
drop 30,000 and come home with nothing. So you have to factor that in of there's a chance I may not get one. And so am I willing to take the risk and drop that kind of money with a chance that I'll come home with nothing, especially with a bow? I mean, you doing it with a bow and then you drastically decrease your odds. So, and that's what I wanted to do as a bow. I don't, and again, no, not knocking on rifle hunters, whatever, like to each their own. But for me personally, it's a personal pursuit. It's each individual's different. And for me personally, I want to do it with a bow. That's part of me pushing my limits, and I want to be that close to that critter. And that just adds to the rush of it for me. So, so yeah, I started looking at those hunts. And I'm like, man, I can't, even though I've got the money, I can't justify dropping that kind of money right now and potentially come home empty-handed. So, I ended up seeing some other guys. I got back from Russia at one point, and I'm like, ooh, Russia. Like I never even considered it, considered that. I knew they had some bears, but I didn't know how big they were. So then I started doing more research, and I ended up finding out that they've got a much larger population in Russia than anywhere else in the world. Like it's not even close to how many brown bears they have versus anywhere else. So I'm like, okay, so they've got more bears, so surely the success rate has to be higher. So then I start doing some more research and then start making some phone calls and come to find out there's several outfitters that will guide brown bear hunts on the Kamchatka Peninsula, which is far east Russia. And so then you just start narrowing it down and calling references and just doing more research, and you're putting all your eggs into one basket of hopefully you're picking a good outfitter, that's going to do their best to put you on a good bear. And, again, you're just taking a lot of risks.
Yeah.
And I ended up finding out that it was half the cost. So that was a huge selling point when I found out it was half the cost. It's like, shoot, I can go twice. So if I don't kill one on the first trip, I can go back a second time for the price that it would cost me to go to Alaska. So that was a huge selling point. Um, and then the more that I started thinking about Russia, the more that I started to fall in love with the idea of Russia as opposed to Kodiak or the peninsula of Alaska, because I'm like, yeah, this isn't something that everybody does.
Right.
Like, who wants to do the thing that everybody else is doing? Like, why not pave your own way and start a new trend or do something that not a lot of people have done? And again, not like I was the first by any means, but there's just not a lot of people going to Russia.
Right.
And so then I just started to fall more in love with that as opposed to Kodiak or the peninsula. And I'm like, yeah, it's freaking Russia. Like that's even cooler. And so yeah, so then it just set things in motion, and then sure enough, at the SCI and thought, you know what? I had the money. It's like, let's do it. So I dropped the money, dropped a big, and I paid for most of my hunt up front. I mean, I had it. I'm like, you know what? Well, I've got it right now. I better just drop it all right now before I do something stupid and blow this on something. And so I paid for the majority of my hunt right there. I still had a little bit left that I paid for later, but yeah, I dropped the majority of it right then. And then sure enough, fast forward 3 months later, the war breaks out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So I booked this before the war had started. And so then the war happens. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, just my luck. And I'm telling you, like, I'd put down a hefty deposit. And I'm just like, how does this work? And so I was in constant communication with the outfitter and just trying to figure out what does this look like. And so we had to push it back a year, which now fast forward. So from the time that I booked it, the war happens. Fast forward maybe a couple of months, because now I'm like, okay, I'm probably never going to Russia. and I still had quite a bit of money in my account. Like it wasn't like I was hurting for money. We were in a, God had been good and put us in a position where we had some money saved up, and we're actually looking to buy some land is what we're looking to do.
Yeah.
And long story short, this other opportunity had kind of presented itself, and it was something I'd always wanted to do, but never thought it was possible. And next thing you know, here I am starting a clothing line. And so this was about 2 years to the date now that I had started this endeavor with the clothing. And I thought, well, Russia's never going to happen. So whatever. And then this other opportunity presented itself and it was too good to pass up. And I'm like, you know what? Now's the time. Like it's either buy land or start a clothing company. And so I'm like, all right, let's go all in on the clothing. And my wife gave me the green light and she's, bless her heart, she's a wonderful support system. And she's like, why not? Go for it.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
so we dropped a bunch of money in this sucker and we just started dumping money into this clothing line. And we spent 2 years just developing and testing products and designing all this stuff. And I designed all the, everything you see, I designed from the camouflage pattern to the logo to the clothing itself, like all of the designs of everything you see, the website, everything. Like I've literally done it all. The only thing I didn't do was run the needle. And so I was working with a factory overseas, obviously, to manufacture the stuff. And yeah, so now fast forward, we postponed the Russia hunt 1 year, which it ended up working out perfectly because if we would have gone the time that we had originally booked it for, now even though I had samples and stuff, my clothing wasn't technically finished yet. And so it worked out great because it pushed it back another year, which put me at the 2 year mark in my clothing endeavor. And now that I go to Russia, now I have the actual finished product of my clothing. And the first animal that I shot in my finished clothing line was number 1 on my bucket list.
That's
So
amazing.
literally so here I am, like again, I think God probably had his hand involved in that because here I am literally shooting number 1 bucket list, a dream of mine, while wearing another dream of mine. And it just added to the whole thing. I mean, that's something I couldn't have scripted out. I couldn't have wrote that in the story.
Yeah.
So that was just a whole nother element that added to it. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, thank you, God. That was awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be hard to top that. I mean, it'll be really hard to top that.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Just, yeah, everything coming together like that and it all worked out. I want to ask you about Russia, though. Going over
Yeah,
there, you talked about, how your interest just kind of spiked and you were committed to that. You were all in on that idea
right.
leading up into booking that hunt and everything. But for somebody going over there from the United States or wherever, wanting to hunt
Yeah.
bear, excuse me, what do the hunting regulations look like in Russia, or is it just the Wild West out there?
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of that element in the Wild West, but I do know that there are tags. So when we got over there, and keep in mind the outfitter that I was with, they spoke very little English. Like,
Okay.
so we were with four, there were 4 guys, they had 4 snowmobiles, and 3 of them, so they knew the word professional because it was funny because they'd always, like, there were so many times where we were fixing snowmobiles, like we kept these because they would run these suckers like you wouldn't believe. I mean, we were going 65 to 70 75 miles per day on these things for the first 3 days because we didn't have good weather, so we couldn't glass. So we just had to just spend time on the snowmobiles trying to cut tracks. But I mean, we're crossing creeks, we're going through trees, we're crossing these wooden bridges that they built by hand. Like, I mean, they were running these suckers in the dirt, so they'd constantly break down. And it's funny because they'd have to fix it, and then they just be like professional, because they got all the tools and everything. So there's like a handful of words that they actually knew as far as English. Big bear, that was one. Big bear, big bear.
Big bear.
Yeah, yeah. But then the other guy, so there was 3 that didn't know much at all about English, and then the other guy, he had a little bit more. He probably had maybe 30 words in his bag. So again, he's got 30 words of English, and so you're trying to use these words and point and. But in the midst of, now we did have an interpreter later that when we were actually going back and we got to pick her brain and she gave us more insight and stuff. That's where we learned a little bit more. But basically they have territories. It sounds like it's similar to Alaska. So it is regulated. I mean, the government does regulate it. And there are restrictions as far as what's legal, what's not, whatever. And again, I don't know Russian. I can't read Russian, but I do know that when I shot my bear, shortly after, so they caped him out, and when they went to put the cape in the bag, they also filled out paperwork before they put the cape in the bag, and so they filled out some sort of paperwork, and they put it in like a plastic just like a plastic sheet so it wouldn't get blood on it and stuff, and then they put that in the bag with it.
Gotcha.
So I'm assuming that was my tag of some sort. And I know that we also, so when we first landed in Kamchatka, which is basically where we were hunting, it was in the peninsula that we were hunting in. When we landed there, we were in the city. We had to go to some other place. I don't know where we were, but we had to show them our passports and we had to show them our driver's license, and they were filling out paperwork. And again, I don't speak Russian, but I'm just assuming that this is the paperwork for our bear, so that without a way, when this goes out, they know who this bear is tied to.
Right.
So, but yeah, so they've got territories, and I found out too that the outfitter that we were hunting with, they actually have the largest territory on the Kamchatka Peninsula of any other outfitter.
Oh, wow.
And so it sounds like they kind of lease it from the government, like they lease these large territories, and it's like, okay, this is your territory, and we're going to allot you so many bear tags. And they've got moose and they've got, snow sheep, and they've got caribou as well in this I mean, it's a huge territory. But so yeah, they basically they allot them so many tags, and I don't know how many, I have no idea what the number is. But the government does regulate that, and they allot them so many tags, and what you get is what you get. And so yeah, but again, at the same token, you're still far east. Like I don't know if there's game wardens or not. I don't know. I do know it was kind of interesting. So when we were driving, we had a 2-hour drive from when we landed in the airport in Kamchatka. We had a 2-hour drive to get to where we were going. And then when we got there, we left the trucks, and then we had a 2-hour snowmobile ride back into our camp.
Oh, wow.
So we are literally in the middle of freaking nowhere. Yeah, it's nowhere. But on our way, in the midst of that 2-hour drive, we stopped at a little cafe and we got some lunch there real quick. And honestly, if it wasn't for all the Russian signs and everybody speaking Russian around you, it felt like a little cafe in the Midwest, like on a deer hunt, because there was a lot of guys coming in camouflage. And I don't know if they were moose hunting. I don't know if, well, it wouldn't have been moose because it was spring, but yeah, I don't know if they were fishing. I don't know if they were all bear hunting. I don't know if they just like wearing camouflage because, I mean, you just see people coming in camouflage.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, it felt like a lot like, yeah, we're just on a deer hunt in the Midwest, and it's like opening day here, like guys are just coming in left and right. And it felt like home, minus the fact that everything was in Russian and everybody was speaking in Russian. Um, but yeah, you'd be driving on, there was a main road, a main paved road before we got off onto the gravel, and you'd see people driving. They'd have boats, and no different than what we got here. They've had John boats. There was some airboats that we'd see, and they're all camouflaged up or whatever. It's like, okay, like these are my people. Like, we speak a different language. We're in a different part of the world, but we're kin here. Like with these, I felt at home.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was neat just to see that. That was a real cool experience. It's you hear a lot in the media, and as far as we're told to hate Russians, and Russians are probably told to hate Americans. But when I landed there in Kamchatka, I'm like, these people are great. Like, I mean, it's a third world country. It is what it is. It's definitely, they don't have near the luxuries that we have here. I mean, you definitely land, and you can see that it's, the houses aren't the nicest houses, and it's definitely a third world country. But aside from that, like the people were good people from what I can tell. I mean, yeah, that was real neat to see. So,
Well, that's a testament to the hunting community as a whole. People from different
oh yeah,
backgrounds, in this case, different nationalities, different cultures all together, and all with one big thing in common that brings them together, and that's hunting in the outdoors. And that's awesome to hear. That's really cool if that's your perspective on that. That's
yeah.
awesome. So flying in there, and I'm purely curious with this, as far as taking your bow from America to Russia on this hunt, was that super complicated?
So no, it wasn't. In fact, I mean, a bow was real easy. That's all I've ever traveled with is a bow, so I don't know any different. So there was so a gun I think is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Man, how much time we got? Because there's so
I
many
got
stories.
I got all the time in the world, man.
So so when I booked the hunt, I went through like a booking agency, essentially, another outfitter that kind of has a booking agency and books it with the outfitter that's actually in Russia then. And from my understanding, I was the only guy that was going. And come to find out, there was another guy who had booked with another booking agency with the same outfitter in Russia. And I had no clue until like a couple weeks before I left. And come to find out, there's another guy from the US. And I'm like, sweet, well, give me his number. Maybe we can meet up in Turkey. So we flew into Istanbul, Turkey. So basically, we were responsible for booking our flights from the US to Turkey. And then from Turkey, the Russian outfitter, they actually booked our flights then from Turkey to Moscow, from Moscow to Kamchatka, and then back to Turkey again on our way back. And then we were responsible of getting back from Turkey to the US. So yeah, about 2 weeks before we left, I ended up getting his information. I said, hey, what time are you flying in Turkey? And he gave, so we ended up meeting up when we landed in Turkey. And we are, I don't know, we're probably 4 hours out from flying into Moscow. And he's a what was he? I think 71 years old. His name was Dean. Good dude. Good dude. Just an older man who he had a cortisone shot in both knees, had cortisone shots in both wrists. Definitely overweight. Like the dude's he's on the downhill side, and he was even saying he's like, this is probably my last time. Like this is probably it.
Yeah.
And but we were talking in Turkey then there before we were flying out to Moscow. And he was telling me that he was actually in Kamchatka back in 2019. Of course, this is way before the war had even broken out. And if you go to the Moscow airport, so whenever if you're taking a gun or a bow, those types of cases, for whatever reason, they go in the oversized luggage part. And so when you get off, and the airport wasn't nearly as big as I thought it'd be. I thought the Moscow airport would be ginormous, but it wasn't nearly as big as I thought it was going to be. In fact, when you land, you actually, they drive the plane up to the facility, I guess, and they actually wheel out some stairs to the door. And so you actually walk down the stairs and get on the tarmac, and then you have to go to a bus, and then they take the bus and then they bus you into the facility. But so we get in, and when he was telling me back in 2019 that he picks up his luggage. They got the same little belt system that we have in the US, where you're waiting for your luggage to go around the big deal and you pick it off. And so he got his luggage off, he got his clothing off that, but his gun wasn't there. So he's trying to figure out where's my gun, and nobody there speaks English. And so finally, eventually he got directed to where it's oversized luggage. So he had to go to the oversized luggage. Well, that kind of that takes you to a separate area away from like the metal detectors where they scan cases and stuff and scan your bags. And so he went over there and got his gun. And again, you don't know what you don't know. You're not from here. And so he grabbed his gun and then just proceeded to walk where the exit signs were and stuff and whatever. But he had never gone through the metal detectors. So basically that allowed him to take which is a dumb, they've got it set up dumb. Like that's partly their fault, as far as the Russian airport goes. Because that allows you to go around kind of the security system that technically you should be taking your gun through. And so he doesn't know. He just grabs his gun and just goes and walks out, Long story short, he comes back from Kamchatka then, and when he lands, so he's coming out, and as he's walking down the stairs again, he sees police cars. He's like, what's going on here? Before his feet even hit the tarmac, they've got him in handcuffs.
Oh, wow.
And they throw him in the cop car and they wheel him around, and they take him to like a little police department within the airport itself. And of course, they're all speaking Russian, and they're all, and he's like, English, like, I don't, what's going on? And so it was a huge ordeal. I mean, and he's telling me all this, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going into Russia with a convicted felon of Russian, like this is like, why are you telling me this? This is crazy. Like, and so now in my mind, I'm like, I wish we'd have never met. Like, now we're gonna be sitting together on the plane. When we land, like they're gonna know you, and they're gonna think that I'm with you, because clearly we're the only two Americans on this plane, and they're gonna think that I'm with you, and now guilty by association, I'm screwed, So he tells me that, and so we land, and it was funny too, because he was telling me about the guy that he thought was causing all the problems back in 2019. He was telling me, he said he's a younger guy, and I just think that he just had it out for me, and he was just trying to set an example and throw his weight around and use that badge. You know how younger guys can let that badge go to their head, and so he's telling me about this younger guy. He's like, I just think he was the problem, and he was the one that caused all the problems, and it didn't need to be that bad. And it was, dude, it was a whole, like, there's so much to the story. So he was even got tied into the mafia when he was there, dude. We ain't got enough time for it. It like Dean is a story in and of himself. So, so they set up a sting operation, because basically there was a lady there that was watching his gun. They set up a sting operation, and they got him like wired up, and they're sending him out to meet with this lady to go get his gun. Oh, it was crazy. It's crazy.
My.
Like, I'm telling you. Oh yeah, it's a whole nother story. So he's telling me all this, and I'm like, this wasn't just this wasn't your normal altercation. I'll just say that. Like, this was far beyond that. And so he's telling me all this as literally as we're like 4 hours, 3 hours out from flying into Moscow. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, of all the things, I gotta be with this guy. So we land, and as you get coming in there, you've got to go through these lines. They've got these, think of probably like 60 small little cubicles that are all glass. They're just like small glass squares, and they're all tied together. You've got tinted glass across all these, so you can't see in. And then each one has a little door that you've got to walk through, but you've got to wait for your line. And so you go in the line, and you walk in this little box, this little glass box, and then you turn to your left, and then you can actually see the people, in the box that you couldn't see before. And so, like normal, I'm just walking. I just pick the shortest line. And so I get in line, and Dean's right behind me. I wished he wasn't, but he is. And so, because I'm like, I don't want to be associated with this guy. And Dean's a good guy. Nothing against Dean whatsoever. At this time, I'm just like, I don't know if this is good for me to be with
Yeah,
him.
I'm here for a bear
And
hunt. Come on
so,
now.
yeah, I just want to kill a bear and get out of here. That's all I want. So sure enough, I go into the little cubicle, and then I take my passport, and I slide underneath the glass, and the lady looks at it, and as soon as she sees it, she looks at me, and as soon as she looked at me, I was like, I'm gonna be here a while. Like, because as soon as she could just see that, it's an American passport right away, and
Yeah.
they probably don't see a lot of those here lately. So she just looks at me, and I'm like, all right, this is where it all starts. Well, then there was a guy also in the cubicle. So there's the lady, then there was a younger guy, and so then she hands the passport back to him. He grabs the passport, looks at it, looks at me, and does this.
Oh,
And I'm like, all right, here we go. And so now I've got to walk back through the same line that I just came through. So I'm walking past Dean on my way out, and the guy who has my passport, he went out kind of a different way. But I've still got to follow him. I've got to go back through the line and meet up with him, and then he's got to take me to wherever we're going. Well, as he walks out of the room and as I'm passing Dean, Dean says, "That's the guy. That's the guy." And I'm like, "Oh, crap. Oh,
oh
no, that's the
no.
young guy that screwed him over in 2019." I'm like, and so right then I'm like, we're done. We're done. Like this is where I lose my life. Like I'm going to be in jail for the next 20 years. And
Oh
so
no.
sure enough, I follow him, and he doesn't speak any English at all. And he just points at the floor like sit down. I'm like, okay. So I sit down outside of this room, and I've got my back up against the wall, and he goes inside, and they're running paperwork, doing whatever. And then they come back out, and like I said, Dean was right behind me. So now he's dealing with his passport, and sure enough, who sits right beside me? Dean sits right beside me on the floor, and I'm like, oh no, like I don't want to. Dean, no, how about you sit over there, like let's put 10 feet, 20 feet between us. Let's not sit right beside each other. And they end up taking him into the. So this has been there's so much to this. So on that plane flight from Turkey to Moscow, there was a drunk guy on the plane, and he had the aisle seat. And so he was completely passed out drunk. And so there was a lady next to me who had the window seat. I was in the middle, and he had the aisle seat. Well, she had to get up and use the restroom in the midst of that. And I'm trying to nudge him. Dude, he's passed out. You're not waking
Yeah.
him up. And so we had to climb over top of this guy. But in the midst of that, I thought, man, I see, because I document everything. Like I just take pictures, and I want to take pictures and I also want those just personal use. Like I want to come home and show my wife, and I want to show my two little boys, like, hey, look at this. Look what I saw, whatever. And so I end up snapping a picture of me with this drunk guy, and he's passed out, and I'm taking a selfie with me and him in it. So that plays into this. So I take that picture. I'm like, oh, this is funny. This would be cool. And I send the wife a text message as soon as we land in Moscow. I send it to her and say, hey, got to ride next to this guy on the way to Moscow, whatever. And so they end up taking Dean into this interrogation room, and they shut the door behind him, and it's soundproof. Like I can't hear anything of what's going on in this room. I don't know if they're throwing chairs. I don't know if they shot Dean in the head. I don't know what's going on. And
Yeah.
so I'm sitting out there with my back against the wall, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, man, I want to take a picture of this so bad. Like I want to take a picture like of a selfie with me, and you can see the tinted glass back behind me, but there's cameras all over this place. And I'm like, but sure as a world, I take my phone out, and they're going to think like I'm a spy, like taking pictures of how do you get through customs or, whatever. So I'm just like, I was so torn, because I'm like, I really want to film something or take a picture of this interaction, because this doesn't happen every day. Like, and if I make it out of this, I want to be able to tell this story and have pictures to prove it. But
Yeah.
I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, no, I need to mind my P's and Q's here. Like, so I just left my phone in my pocket, didn't take any pictures. Well, then Dean comes out after probably an hour and a half, and he says, man, they went through my phone and everything. Like they went through all my apps. They pulled up my apps. They went through all my pictures. And when he said they went through all my pictures, my immediate thought was, oh no, I took a picture of that drunk guy. And I'm like, what if he is like buddies with one of these guys or something, like, oh, like I hope this doesn't come back and bite me in the butt. Like I'm screwed. Like I'm screwed. Like sure enough, he's gonna end up being like best buddies with one of these guys, or his dad's gonna end up like working for customs or something stupid.
Yeah.
And so I start sweating a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. And so long story short, the outfitter had given us a phone number and he said, if you have any troubles in customs, give this guy a call. Have them give this guy a call. Well, Dean didn't do that right out of the gate. And so finally he said, and I was like, Dean, did you give him the number? He's like, no, I didn't think about it. I'm like, well, give him the number. Like next time you go back in, if they bring you back in or whatever, give him the number. Because at this point they brought an interpreter. And so sure enough, he goes back in and sure enough, he gives him the number. And then before you know it, we're out through the gate, within 20 minutes. But still we were in there for 3 hours and it's like it was a pretty intense 3 hours. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Um, but we made it through, and then when we got to Kamchatka, it was easy peasy. We didn't go through anything in Kamchatka. We didn't go through any customs. We didn't go through any metal detectors. Like literally, we got the VIP treatment. A lady picked us up in this van, and we went a separate way of everybody else that went on the buses. And she took our luggage tickets, and she took us back to this VIP room, and that's what they called it. The VIP room, and they had a bar back there, and they had free drinks and everything. And we're
Wow.
literally sitting in this lounge, and I'm drinking my water, and Dean's drinking his beer, and we're just sitting there. And sure enough, she comes back with her luggage and says, "Here's your luggage." And we walk out the back door, and away we go. Like
Wow.
it was, and I'm like, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, did somebody get paid? Like this. I feel like we should have gone through something, at least one metal detector or something. Like so yeah, I guess that was our flight in.
Wow.
Does that answer your question? I kind of
I
rambled there for
guess so.
quite a while.
Absolutely. That's a crazy story, man. Golly, I can't even imagine. That's awesome. Not awesome that
I mean,
it
but all
happened
of
to
that,
you, but
right? But I mean, but see, but all of that adds to the adventure. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Like, if I had just gone to Alaska, it wouldn't be nearly. Now I think, granted, there's still the risk factor. There's still the unknown of what if I do get thrown in jail or something. And obviously my wife, she's on pins and needles. Like that's all that's going through her mind is the bear's going to kill me. If the bear doesn't kill me, Putin's going to throw me in jail. Like those are the
right.
two things that she's thinking. Like, and yeah, so that's all she can think about. But for me, like those, and that's why I fell in love with Russia. Like, and when the war happened, like as dumb as this may sound, I kind of got a little bit excited. I'm like, if I can actually pull this off and actually go in the country while there's a war going on and all the animosity and turmoil and everything that's happening, if I can get in and get out, like how much cooler would that be? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like this isn't Alaska. This isn't the safety net of Alaska and you're on US soil. This is freaking Russia. Like that's even cooler yet. Like, and and again, people are different, but for me, I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I like the element of the fact that all of that stuff was happening. I mean, 2 weeks before our plane flight left, they had a terrorist attack. They traced it back to Hamas, and so it added to that. And so literally, when I'm sitting there on the floor, the only other people that were there were also people like of Iraqi descent. You know what I'm saying? Like they're the darkest skinned guys, and yeah, I mean, it's like there's
Yeah.
a reason why they're sitting on the floor next to me because there
Yeah.
was literally a terrorist attack by those types of people 2 weeks before that. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is it. Like, and so yeah, your heart's racing and it's I mean, I think that's why we hunt in general. It's the heart racing, it's the your hands shaking after you shoot. Like, I mean, isn't that why we do it? Like I was always told that if you ever lose that feeling to stop.
Right.
And so when you go to Russia, I mean, you're just taking that heart racing to a whole nother level. And then when you're face to face with a brown bear, again, that heart racing, it's bumping up another 30 to 40%. Like that's why we do it, is for the adrenaline rush. I mean, not just the adrenaline rush, but everything else that you get to encounter and experience along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, Russia, absolutely, hands down, best adventure of my life, no question. And Lord willing, knock on wood, I want to go back without a doubt.
That's awesome. I think back as you're talking about this and as you're summing. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the hunt yet, but as you're summing up your trip and
Right.
everything, it was actually a quote that you had in one of your posts about it, and it says the harvest of the animal is only a small percentage of why we hunt, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that talking to you and learning, about your experience and everything, it's certainly applicable to this. It's crazy. It's awesome.
well, that's, I mean, that's just it. Like, well, look at how much we've talked yet, and we haven't even. That's just it. We haven't even talked about the hunt yet.
Exactly.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like hunting is about the entire experience, and the kill
Yes.
of the animal is such a small percentage of that.
Yes.
Like we haven't even got to the fact of we haven't even got to the snowmobile ride into camp yet. Like the 2 hour ride into camp, I can't. We crossed all these wooden bridges that they had built by hand. Like so we parked the deals and I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, there ain't no camp around here, you know? And I'm like, so where's camp? And then he's like, and he points towards this, what I thought was a mountain at the time. Come to find out it was a volcano. And
Oh
I'm like,
wow.
oh, how cool is this? Like, who gets to hunt next to a volcano? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the
Yeah.
coolest stuff ever. Like, where do you find this stuff? You know, only in Russia, you know? Like yeah, so he points towards this, what I, like I said, I thought it was a mountain. I was like, oh, okay, camp's over there by the mountain, you know. Later I find out it's a volcano. But so they had a snowmobile waiting there, and then he drives the snowmobile back in, and I'm like, so what are we doing here? Like, there's no way we're getting on this one snowmobile. And then sure enough, here come three other guys. You know, they'd radioed in, and sure enough, here comes three other guys, and I was like, holy cow, like they just came out of the middle of nowhere. Like there's just trees and just it looks like Alaska. It looked a lot like Alaska.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you see some snowmobiles coming. It's like, where are these guys coming from? You know, like I'm looking for smoke or something, like a smoke from a smokestack from a cabin. And I don't see anything. So I don't know where these guys are coming from. And so we just hop on this thing. Long story, I mean, it ended up being a 2 hour ride back into camp, you know. But I'd say within the first 15 minutes of the snowmobile ride, we come to this river, and I'm like, how are we gonna cross this thing? Like this is a decent sized river, and it's there's no way you're running the snowmobile through this river because it's too deep. Like you can just looking at it, you know it's too deep.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, how are they gonna cross this? Like, and dude, I'm not kidding you. We come to that first bridge, and I posted pictures of that first. I posted pictures of several bridges. I bet they had probably 30 to 40 of these different bridges. Some were made by, you know, actual lumber that was, you know, like one buys or whatever. And then some were just trees that literally they just cut trees down and just lay them over top, and then they nail trees and they build a bridge across a little stream or a creek or whatever, and take the snowmobiles across these things, and away we go. Like, I mean, it's the coolest thing. So yeah, we come to that first bridge, and as soon as we get to that first bridge, I'm like, yep, take my money because I'm coming back. Like this is already cool. Like the fact that we're gonna cross this thing, we had to lean to our left because this bridge tilted to the right, you know, on the way in. And so, and my guy, he's pointing this way. I'm like, no, no, no. I can see how the bridge is tilted. I know that I have to shift my body weight, you know. So
Yeah.
we're leaning this way, you know. So that way we don't fall in, you know. And I'm like, this is cool. Like this is all part of the adventure. And
Wow.
so we're crossing these bridges on the way back to camp, and then we pull into camp, and it's just like this old trapper's lodge, and you know, got a big caribou rack on it, and I mean, it's the adventure of a lifetime, man. That's why we do it. That's why we do it. And so then yeah, we get back into camp, and I guess you want no, I guess I continue with the hunt. I don't know what you got
Yeah,
another
yeah,
question.
keep going, man. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
rolling.
So
It's
so we
awesome.
pull in, and so we pull into camp, and so the weather was bad for the first about 3.5 days, and so typically what they like to do is they like to get up on one of these mountains because there were mountains as well, and so they like to get up on these mountains, and there's parts where you can see a long ways and just glass a long ways, and if you can't see, I mean, one, it's easy to see a big brown bear when it's all white and snow. So the snow was just starting to melt. You know, these bears are coming up out of hibernation. For the most part, a lot of stuff was still. I mean, it was 25 to 40 degrees is what the temperatures were when we were there. Um, and so what they typically like to do is they'll run snowmobiles, and if they cut a track, great. But for the most part, they can get up on these high points in glass, and it's real easy to pick out a big brown bear, you know, in the snow. And if you don't see a brown bear, it's real easy to see tracks. And
Yeah.
so they'll glass the tracks and like, okay, I think that's a big enough track. Let's at least drive over there and check it out and see how big it actually is. But for the first 3.5 days, we couldn't do that because the weather was just, it was raining, it was miserable. But again, I'm kind of glad that was the case because it allowed us to experience more stuff.
Yeah.
But then we expound on that later. But so yeah, we weren't able to glass because it was just the clouds were just low, and so if you're up on the mountain, you can't see anything because you're up at a higher elevation. The clouds just set in on you. And so what we did for the first 3.5 days is we just rode snowmobiles. And I asked them, and of course everything's in kilometers over there, so I had to do the math on that. But basically, we went anywhere from 65 to 75 miles every day. Like I'm talking,
Wow.
yeah, sun up, sundown, running these snowmobiles nonstop. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, so we're going through, I can't tell you how many rivers and creeks and streams we were driving through, and canyons and up and down over mountains and through mountain, and just So, so man, we saw so much stuff. I don't even know. There's several different bird species that I have no clue what they were, but I'm like, well, that's cool. Like all these different birds. There was some kind of eagle or a giant hawk of some sort that we saw. I'm like, that's pretty neat. There were speckled belly geese, so they had the same geese that we have here in the States. They had some speckled belly geese that were flying. I recognized their noise and I look up, and of course they're all pointing too. And I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what those are. Like we hunt those back home. So they had the same species of speckled belly geese. Whenever we were going on some rivers and creeks, they had mallards, they had mallard ducks there, same as we've got in the States here. I'm like, well, that's kind of neat. I didn't, had no clue. And of course, if you think about it, again, Alaska is not that far. They had they had some bufflehead ducks. They had several species of ducks that I saw, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what we've got in the States. We saw wolverine tracks. We saw a fox. That was day 5. That was actually when I shot my bear. That was before I shot my bear. Um, we were across the and I didn't get that was the one thing I one of the things I regret is I didn't get any footage and I didn't get any picture of these snow bridges. So and they were sketchy. Some of them were sketchy. So basically it snows so much like literally, and he was telling me, he said typically the snow would be, he say snow this no high, this high, this high. And he's showing me at camp how high it would be. And I'm like, holy cow, like this snow would be literally 10 foot deep. Like they get a ton of snow at this area, apparently. He said typically this time of year snows this deep. And I'm like, really? Like, holy cow. So the snow was melting quicker this year than it was the previous years. Um, but you get that much snow, and literally this snow, of course, everything freezes up. Your creeks freeze up, some of your rivers even freeze up. So you get that much snow on top. Well, then what happens is stuff starts to melt, the water is running underneath of that snow. And so the water's flowing, but you still have who knows how many foot of snow.
Yeah.
And so you're able to cross these creeks, these small creeks or these small streams, and never go through the water because you've got a snow bridge. Well,
Wow.
but surely, yeah. So surely as it's melting, more and more, that snow is getting thinner. That snow bridge is getting thinner from the bottom and from the top too a little bit. And so there were some snow bridges that literally when we crossed, it dropped out underneath of us, and I'm on the back of this thing. And so, like, literally, I can feel myself drop as the snow bridge collapses underneath of us, but we just make it across. And then, of course, he's pointing, like, no, 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 go down. You like, don't cross this one anymore because it's done. And so it's like we could fall through this snow bridge and fall. There were some literally you could have fallen, I bet 10 to 15 foot easily,
Oh,
and
wow.
fallen down into this small stream. They weren't big rivers, but they'd have a lot of these small streams. And it's like if we fall through this snow bridge, and I wished I would have just taken the time to set up a camera. See, but they did, and I think they felt the pressure too because they knew the weather was bad, and so they knew that we're just gonna have to cover a lot of ground and just burn up these snowmobiles and just go all over the mountainside. And like I said, I don't even, they had GPSs on all of the snowmobiles, so they knew where we were at. We covered, I don't even know how much ground we covered. Like I said, it was 65 to 75 miles a day, just going all over the countryside. Like I don't know how large of a territory we covered, but it was massive. So there's a lot of stuff that I wasn't able to film just because they weren't in filming mode. It's like,
Right.
no, we have to get you a bear. That's our job, is to get you a bear. We're not going to take the time to set up the nice cameras and film everybody crossing this little snow bridge and film icicles dripping water, and you know what I'm saying. Like it's like, no, I'm pretty much filming whatever I can with my phone, and even then I'm trying to hang on with both hands, especially when we cross these snow bridges because some of them would drop out underneath of you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I didn't film any of those. I didn't get any pictures of those, and those were really cool. Like I wish I got more pictures and got some video footage, but I didn't. Um, so yeah, so first 3.5 days, just weather was just crappy. But we cut one track. We cut a lot of tracks, but then we wouldn't go after them unless it was a big track. So I remember my first big track. That is one thing I will never forget. Like, and I've been to the big conventions, and I've taken my hand, I've placed them on the bear's palm, and then it's like, well, okay, now I know how big they are, and because I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's a big bear, and so because I know that I'm going to go on this Russian hunt, and I want to know if the outfitter's putting me on a big bear when I put my hand down on this snow
Right.
print,
Yeah.
like, okay, I know this is a big one because I put my palm, whatever. So I'll never forget the first big one, and he's like, big bear, big bear. And I'm like, can I get out? So I get off the snowmobile and I put my hand down to this thing, and I'm just like, holy cow, this thing is, and I knew they were that big, but for the first time in my life, I'm putting my hand in the print of an animal that's alive in these woods somewhere.
Right.
Like this isn't a dead one at a show. This is a live one that literally just left this who knows how long ago, like at least within the last day for sure. And that sucker is out here somewhere. Like, and he could kill us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like this, you don't mess with these things. Like just massive. So I will never forget the first time that I put my handprint down in this big paw print. I'm like, this is cool. Like this, like there was a lot of respect, just immediate respect for this. I mean, at the time, it's almost like this mystical creature. You know what I'm saying? It's like this thing's out here somewhere, and
Yeah. This is real. Yeah.
whatever he is, oh, this is real. Yeah, and it's like I got a lot of respect for you, dude. Like, because clearly you could take me, no question. It's
Yeah.
not even an issue, you know.
Yeah.
So we cut that first track, and and so we're just hauling. Immediately we cut a big track and they know it's a big track. So now it's just balls to the walls and they've got it floored and we're flying through the woods and going through some open space. And whenever we hit the open spots, I don't know how fast those snowmobiles could go, but we're going as fast as a snowmobile can go. I don't know if we're doing 60. We're going fast. We're going as fast as those suckers can go in the wide open. Then of course we get in some timber and then they got to slow down, but they're weaving in and out of trees and they're going as fast as you can go without killing somebody. And even then, it was day 3, I think I got smoked in the forehead with a tree limb, about knocked me off. And I was like, I did
Oh,
this number. And luckily I was holding on with both hands and had a big old red mark on my forehead. It just missed my goggles. And so that it was you had to have your head on the swivel because they weren't slowing down for nothing, you know. And so yeah, so we're weaving in and out of trees and just trying to stay on this track and not lose this track and catch up to this bear because we don't know how long ago the track was left. And he's telling me he's doing this number like you look because his job was to not kill us and his job was to go as fast as he could go without hitting a tree and not losing those tracks. So his head's down, following the tracks, and his head's looking for trees not to hit right here in front of us. And so I'm on the back hanging and I'm looking to my left and looking to my right, looking for a bear. And so, and it was, man, it was so intense because you'd come up on these little hills, these, you know, as you're going up the mountain, you come up on a little ridge or whatever, and you're just sitting there thinking like, oh man, he could be over this next ridge, like he could be right here. And
yeah.
so literally we come up over the ridge and you're like, oh, okay, he's not here. He's not here. He's not here. And then so then you're going, and then if you come up on another little and dude, your heart was just every time, like, dude, the anticipation, like the roller coaster was just okay, he's not there. Oh, he's not. And man, it just
Wow.
added to the intensity of this. Oh, it was incredible. It was
Wow.
that just added to it. And I'm just thinking, like, if we were glassing, it wouldn't be nearly as cool. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like it's one of those deals where it's like, okay, we see him 1,000 yards and he's over there on that other mountain, you know. And so your heart has time to catch up with it before you get to him, you know. But this deal of weaving in and out of these trees and coming up over these little ridges, like your heart was just like, oh, okay, he's not here, he's not here. And partly too, it's like, what if we because there were times where the snowmobile was literally on the track. Like sometimes it'd be off to the right, sometimes it'd be off to the left, but then there were times where we're right on the track. And I'm like, what if we come up over one of these little ridges and we run right into his butt? Like, what do you do? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, you don't have your gun out. My bow's on a sled, three sleds behind us. Like, we're screwed. You know, like, so
What are we gonna
it
do?
was the ultimate. Oh, dude, it was the ultimate rush. Like, it was the coolest thing in the world. And so the other thing I won't forget. There's about 3 things that. Well, there's a lot that I won't forget, but just as far as just sheer adrenaline rush, like nobody's business. So again, we probably followed these tracks for 45 minutes. And eventually you start to get to the point where it's like, okay, he's probably not over this next ridge. And so your anticipation's dropping a little bit, but that's just it. It's when you start to get comfortable, that's when that's probably when it's going to happen. So you almost couldn't allow yourself to get comfortable, but I was starting to get a little bit comfortable with like, okay, it's going to be a while before we find the spare. You know, we kept coming up over ridges and we're on this track for 45 minutes and so, but again, I'm just still looking. I'm like just kind of just enjoying the ride, and it was still fun riding these snowmobiles. And so I'm looking, and looking over to my right, and we come up over another little ridge. And I'm like, oh, where's he at? No, he's not over here. And then I look to my left, and that bear is 30 yards from us, and he's paralleling us, running the same speed we're going.
Oh my.
And oh, dude, my heart it went from being about normal to out my throat and out my mouth. Like I'm just, and so I'm tapping a bear, 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 you know, and then he's and me, you know, and so he's trying to kind of get away from him because, like I said, the most impressive thing is I'm like, that bear's going as fast as we are.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm thinking, dude, you better have your A game, because if we hit a tree, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Because it was now in the wide open, absolutely we could outrun those bears without question. I wasn't concerned at all. But in the trees where you're weaving it out, I'm thinking, dude, he's in stride with us right now. Like
Yeah.
literally, he is, he was 30 yards to our left, and that bear is going at the same speed we're going. And I'm just sitting like, holy cow, like, is this a good idea to be bringing a bow in here? This is stupid. Like, what was I thinking? And it so that rush, I don't know as if I'll ever compete with that. I mean, I did the coming up here on the same trip, but as far as like whitetails, I just don't think I can ever reach that again. Hunting
No, that's a
whitetails,
whole nother
like,
different deal.
oh, it was, dude, you got to do it. I mean, I don't care who you are, you've got to do this. It's worth it. It's worth it. So now, luckily, he was an 8 footer. So they said 8 foot, 8 foot, 8 foot. Not big bear, not big bear. I mean, to me, I'm thinking he's a freaking giant. Like
Yeah.
I just shot. I would have known any different. I'm like, I'd shot him. And but luckily, and I say luckily, he was only an 8 footer, because if I'm being honest, I don't think I could have got my composure together to make a good shot. I think
Oh
I'd have been
yeah.
shaking and my air had been tinking, and because it was just one of those things, like it just happened so fast, and we were immediately that close that quickly, that my heart's just, yeah, it just exploded. It'd have been different, like I said, if I could have seen him out there at 1,000 yards, and okay. And now, and we're talking about a game plan. It's like, okay, so I have an idea of what's going to happen, and how we're going to approach this, and how we're going to, put the stock on whatever. But on this deal, I'm just like, what do we do? Do we just shoot him right here off the snow? How does
Yeah.
this work? Like,
Yeah.
like, dude, I'd lost. No, I could have done it. I could have done it. No, it wouldn't happen. I like to think that I'm calm and collect, but no, that first one, I don't think I could have done it. Like we would have had to have like driven away from the bear to where we couldn't see him whatsoever. And then like, okay, you guys, calm me down. Like, okay, I know that guy's in there. Man, he was really big. Like, okay, now
Right.
let's, like, that's what we would have had to have done.
Yeah.
So luckily he was only 8 foot, so we didn't go after him. So we just left him alone. I got some video of him, whatever. And so that was pretty much like the first 3.5 days. And we ended up cutting another track of another one, and same deal, only an 8 footer. We ended up cutting a track and it was the biggest tracks we saw the whole trip. And dude, I would have loved to have at least seen that bear. Even if I wouldn't have had the opportunity to shoot him, I would have loved to have just seen him, because that was the biggest set of tracks that we'd saw the whole trip. And of course, and we were on him. I mean, we were cutting his tracks, and we're going, and he's taking us up further and further. Well, and if I could say he's taking us up, for all I know, he was just walking the day before, and he was just going back to his place where he hibernated or something. I don't know.
Right.
But anyways, we're going up this mountain, and it's like I said, so it was raining at the lower elevations, and we're getting higher up, and it's snowing. And he's like, no, not safe, not safe. Like basically there's a blizzard happening at the higher elevation. He's like, we can't go. We have to leave this bear. And so we had to leave him be. And I was kind of bummed, like, oh man, like those tracks are big. Like that was the biggest we had seen up to that point, and those were the biggest we had seen the whole trip. So we had to let him go. Another one, we cut some tracks, and he ended up going down into a big steep canyon that we couldn't get down into. And if we could have got down into it, there's no way we were getting back up out of it with the snowmobiles. Like there's just no way. So we had
Yeah.
to let him go. Um, so then fast forward to day 5. Oh wait, no. So Dean got a rifle, and I told him, so it was raining the first 3.5 days, and I said, Dean, I said, I really want to try to get mine on film. I said, so, and this rain isn't the best for footage, and it's not the best for my camera anyways. I said, so, and he was, like I said, this was his last hunt. And I'm like, you got first dibs, man. Like, if we see a shooter and it's raining, you got first dibs.
Yeah.
He's got the rifle, so it's going to be a little easier anyways. And so that was, I think it was day 3. And this is another time I won't forget. This is intense. So they end up spotting one. And so Dean, he's on a sled. He's on the back snowmobile. And so sure enough, they kind of wheel Dean around, and the bear doesn't know we're there. And he rolls off the sled, and they're getting him the gun. And it was probably 150 yards. They end up getting on this bear, and he shoots, and you can hear it hit the bear. Now I couldn't see where it was. And now again, I'm still, keep in mind, this would have been the third bear that we saw as far as like on foot. So I'm not thinking like I've got to film this. I'm just caught up in the experience of it all. It's like, oh my gosh, that's a giant. And they're telling me this is a shooter. And I'm like, yeah, he's bigger than the other two that we saw. Like he's big. And so I didn't have my phone out. I'm just lost in the moment of this.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, he's got the rifle and he shoots. You hear it hitting, and the bear turns and I'm like, just hearing that roar, I'm like, dude, there is some power in that sucker. Like I hope he doesn't know where we're at, you know.
Yeah.
And so then Dean shoots again. You hear it hitting, and then that sucker turns and he looks and he sees us. And now there was a set of pine trees. Now keep in mind these pine trees. I don't know. They were probably I'd say these pine trees were probably 12 foot tall, anywhere from 6 to 12 foot tall. But the snow, they had snowed so much that it had weighted them down, so they were kind of a lot of them were just kind of bent over. But there were still a lot of these pines that were over top of your head. Because eventually later we end up walking into these pines, and I'm like, man, these suckers are over. And you could tell they were tall because we were on the outskirts, on the edges of these. Because
Right.
this wasn't something that you drive in with a snowmobile. It wasn't something you'd really drive into. And so we went out around these, actually ended up to shoot the bear. And so we had this group of pines between us and the bear. Well, this bear starts coming at us now, and he gets into these pines, and I'm not making this up. And for the life of me, I wish I'd had my phone out and filmed this, because this is something you just have to see. It's literally the crap you see in the movies. Like, think of a lion coming through grass, and that grass is just parting as that sucker's just like, it's the stuff you see in the movies.
Yeah.
And this isn't grass. These are pine trees. Like, these now they're not giant pine trees, but they're still trees. And these suckers are parting as this sucker is coming at us. And you can't see the bear. All you can see are these trees just as he's just coming. It's like, oh crap! Like he's coming at us. Like we're screwed. And so now at this point, everybody's standing up on the snowmobiles. And keep in mind, so he'd shot 3 times before he got to the pines. One of them ricocheted off of his face. Now we didn't know what it ricocheted off of at the time, but you heard him shoot, and then went. And I'm like, oh crap, that ricocheted off of him. Like that didn't even penetrate him. Like, and
Wow.
again, it just
Oh my
reminds
word.
you of what you're dealing with. This isn't a deer. This is a freaking Volkswagen coming at you. You know what I'm saying? And he's got
Yeah.
claws and teeth, and he's gonna kill you. Like, and when I heard that thing ricochet, I was just like, oh great. He's shooting a freaking gun and it's ricocheting. Like, what's an arrow gonna do? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, and I even got my bow out. And so I'm like, we're screwed. We're screwed. Like, this is where I die. And so it hits these pines. And so and it's crazy how quickly your mind, adrenaline can just take your mind, and you're going through 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you're processing a million thoughts like in a split second. And so I'm looking at the pines. I'm like, okay, there's about a 30-yard gap between us and the pines. So as soon as he pops out of these pines, he's gonna be at 30 yards. And so I'm like, man, I hope these dudes. I'm thinking that so Dean's shooting this old Russian. So they all got like these old Russian Soviet army type guns, you know. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm looking at these. I'm like, are they on? Are they even on? Like, do we even know if did anybody shoot these guns before we went out? You know, like this is what's going through my head. Like, do we even know if these are on? Like, do you even have the right bullets? Like, what's going on here? You know, like, I
Just
wish we'd have shot these before we left. Like, why didn't we shoot these before we left? Like, are we sure? Yeah. So like, my mind's just going
your
crazy.
mind's just going
And
crazy. Oh,
dude, this whole time, and the bear's just coming at us, and you just see these pine trees just parting as the sucker's coming. And so by now we're all standing up on top of the snowmobiles, trying to see down into these pines, and they're all doing this, and it's like, you know, they got their heads up, like looking, like waiting to maybe he'll get to an opening or something, and it ain't happening. And so in my mind, right or wrong, this is what I rationalized.
no.
I'm looking, I'm like, I guess I'll just, so they had these sleds that one was carrying Dean. They had a big sled that they pulled behind the snowmobiles. One was carrying Dean, and then they had another one that was carrying my bow, and then also some gasoline, because we were putting on a lot of miles, so they have to refill. So this is my thought. I look at this sled next to me. I'm like, well, I guess I'll just dive underneath the sled and dig a hole and throw the snow over top me so he can't smell me. Like that. That was my thinking. I'm like, that's where I'm going. Like when this sucker pops out at 30 yards, I'm going underneath that sled. I'm digging a hole, throwing snow on top of me. He won't be able to smell me. I hope not, anyways. And that's how I'm going to survive this. Um, Luckily, and like I said, dude, my mind, you're just a million thoughts in like
Yeah.
that quick. So luckily, he stops at 60 yards. So you see these pines just the whole way to you, and then all of a sudden they stop, and it's like, did he die? What's happening? What's happening? Because you can't see him. So I
Yeah.
was like, maybe he just fell over dead. Maybe we're lucky. And dude, if there's ever gonna be a poop in your pants moment, this was it. The sucker stood up. out of these pines, and he looks to his right first, and then he looks, and he looked right at me, and I'm just like, I'm dead.
Yeah.
I'm dead.
Your heart just
Like we
sinks. Oh
had
my.
we had a 30-minute conversation. It wasn't 30 minutes, but literally he and I had a 30-minute conversation, and he did all the talking and I did all the listening. And he basically told me, I'm coming for you and you're going to be dead. And I was like, I believe you. I believe you. I'm dead. Like
Yeah.
we had that conversation, and he was looking at me right in. It's
Oh,
I was
wow.
explaining to some guys the other day. I was like, it's like if you're, I don't know if you've ever been in church or not, but the preacher would be scanning the audience of like 2,000 people. But he'll like talk on something, and it's like, dude, he looked right at me, man.
Yeah.
I
He
know he
looked
did.
at
He
me.
looked right at me, Like that's what it was. Like we were a group of guys. There were 6 of us, and we were all pretty close together. But dude, I'm telling you, dude, I'm telling you, he looked right at me, and he looked right in my eyes, and he told me, "I'm coming for you. And I'm going to kill you." And I said, "I believe you. I believe you." Like, okay, all right. And
Wow.
then, but then, boom, boom, they put 2 in his chest, and then dropped him. I was like, oh, okay, because I thought I was dead. Like and I knew I was dead,
Wow.
And so,
That is
but that
insane.
moment of him, I'll never forget. And I wished I was so lost in the moment and just the experience of it. Like I wish I'd have brought a cameraman with me. I wish I'd have spent the extra money for the plane flight and all that I needed to do to bring the cameraman, and maybe we'd have gotten it on footage, because just to see the trees parting and then they stop, like it's the crap you see in the movies. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then all of a sudden when that sucker stood up though, because you knew that, because we were driving right by these trees when we were trying to get on him. It's like these things are taller than us. And when that sucker stood up, he's head and shoulders above these.
Wow.
And it was just, oh my goodness. It was just, again, should I really be trying to kill one of these with a bow? And not to mention the fact that something ricocheted off, the bullet ricocheted off of some part of his body. And then later found out, we end up going in, they end up killing, we end up going in there, and sure enough, come to find out, it ricocheted off of his face. Went
That
right
is
off of his nose,
crazy.
right off of his cheekbone. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I'm just like, what am I doing with a bow? Like, should I really be doing this with a bow? Like, maybe my wife was right. Maybe I should have stayed home. Maybe I am gonna die. Maybe my boys are gonna grow up without a father. Like, this is where I die,
Oh man.
Like, but to see that sucker stand up was one of the coolest, most awe-inspiring things. Like, there was reverence, there was power, there was all of that wrapped up into just that moment of him. The pine stopped moving. There was like a calm, and then all of a sudden, this freaking giant just raises up, looks to his right, looks right at us, squares us up, and centers me up, and I'm like, it like the world paused. The world
Yeah.
paused in that moment, and we had a 30-minute conversation, and he said, "I'm coming for you. I'm going to kill you, and your kids aren't going to have a dad." And I'm like, I believe you. Okay. Like I had already come to grips with that's where I die.
Wow.
And then
Man.
all of a sudden, boom, boom, 2 in the chest, and then he drops. I'm like, oh, okay. I think I'm gonna be okay.
Literally like a
It was
movie.
it was
Holy
crazy. It
cow.
was crazy. Yeah.
Wow. Golly.
Sorry.
No, you're good. So you've talked about several times about how, these you're taken back by the size and just these beasts of creatures that these bears are, and second guessing your archery choice.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What kind of arrow setup are you running in preparation for a hunt like this? That and
Yeah.
I'm a bow
So
only guy too, so I'm also just curious from that aspect. But
yeah. So I've got a Hoyt bow. The arrows that I'm shooting, and I've shot these. This is what I shoot at whitetails. I'm not.
yeah,
It's not like I switch anything up. Now it is a heavier arrow, but it's an Easton FMJ. It's a full metal
okay, yeah,
jacket, so it's a carbon arrow wrapped with aluminum is what it is, and so they are a heavier arrow. Um, and then on the tip of that, I've got a Sever broadhead, but I'm shooting, they've got a 1.5, I think they've got a 1.75 inch, and they've got a 2 inch cutting diameter. And I like the larger cutting diameter. Like I've had no issues with penetration. And maybe it's because I'm shooting that heavier FMJ arrow. But all my deer, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 where I've hit like the opposite shoulder, um, if they got like a quarter away shot or something. Yeah, I mean, all my deer, literally, I'm burying that arrow in the dirt on the other side. I get a complete pass through,
yeah,
barrows. Yeah. And when I ended up shooting my bear, then on day 5, like it was the same thing. Now he was quartering away. Now, granted, he was at 10 yards, so it was a close shot. It wasn't like I was shooting him out there at 60. Um, but there's no doubt in my mind that I would have had a complete pass through. had it not hit the opposite shoulder. So he was kind of walking away a little bit, quartering away. And my arrow went right up through him, shooting for the opposite shoulder like you're supposed to. And again, it hit that opposite shoulder. But I was buried up to the fletchings, and I'm like, yeah, it would have got a complete pass through had I not. If he'd have been broadside, perfectly broadside, I wasn't shooting for that opposite shoulder. Yeah, I'd have got a complete pass through, no question.
Gotcha.
So and what's crazy is, and I don't know. I mean, like I'm pretty confident that a rifle is more lethal. Like I'm pretty sure that's the case. But for whatever reason, my bear didn't go 15 yards, and then he piled up.
Oh, wow.
And I gave Dino a hard time. I'm like, yeah, here you got to put. So he shot his bear 8 times.
Oh,
They put
wow.
they put 8 bullets in that bear. Yeah. And I'm
Holy
like,
smokes.
all I needed was one arrow. I mean, I think it's just a matter of placement. And again, we talked afterwards, and I'm like, Dean, why did you shoot that gun before we went out? Like, how do you know if it was on? Like, maybe it wasn't on, Like, I mean, we could hear it hit, but I didn't have my binoculars up. Like I said, I was just lost in the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We don't, you don't know where it hit until after the fact, and then you're looking at bullet holes and you're looking at his hide, and there's the cape him out. You're able to count bullet holes and figure, okay, this is an entrance, this is an exit, and you're doing the math. And it's like, okay, we put 8 bullets in this sucker, not counting the one that ricocheted off of his face, so 9 total. You
Oh,
know, and but yeah, I had one arrow, and yeah, he went 15 yards, and maybe the bear was already ready to die. I don't know. Maybe he was just an old. And now they did say he was a really old bear because they look at their teeth, and his teeth are just gnarled down. And so maybe I just got a bear that was like super old, and he was like going to die in the next couple of days, anyways. I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe that's why he only went 15 yards.
Yeah.
But
Are
yeah,
are these guys up there, these Russians, are they looking at you like you're crazy for bringing a bow up there, or do they get bow hunters fairly
no,
regularly?
so, yeah, so they get bow hunters. I wasn't the first one they've taken, and I know I won't be the last either. In fact, a guy reached out to me on Instagram afterwards, and we did some talking. He said, "Hey, who did you go with? Whatever." And we talked, and he told me who he went with, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's the same guy. Like, you're gonna be fine." Um, and so, yeah, and I need to catch. I forgot who he is. I get a lot of messages, so I don't. He's probably lost in my messages somewhere. But I hope if you're listening, man, send me a message. Let me know how you did, if you got one or not. But um, yeah, so I know I wasn't there first, because I'd even seen several in the midst of researching outfitters. Like, I'm like, okay, but how many guys have taken bow hunters? Because there's and you probably notice, like, and I get it. I don't hold any grudges. Like, there's a lot of outfitters that just hate bow hunters, and
Yeah.
it's nothing personal, but it's obviously, as an outfitter, what helps you sell hunts is pictures of success, of showing
Yeah.
success. And obviously you have more success with a rifle than you do with a bow. And so there's a lot of outfitters that hate bow hunters because it's like, dude, you're gonna decrease my chances of having success, harvesting an animal. And so there's a lot of outfitters that don't like bow hunters. But these guys know, they're like, no, come on, I was like, okay, let's go.
Cool.
Yeah, so it was, there's no, I mean, if I go back again, Lord willing, I will. I'm going with the same group, no question, same group of guys.
Yeah.
So they got their stuff together, and they know what they're doing.
Awesome.
So
Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
very cool. Well, man, you've given me some sneak peeks talking about 10 yards and the quartering
Oh yeah,
shot and all
yeah.
this kind of stuff. Let me hear about your bear and how all that went
So
down.
yeah, so fast forward to day 5, we wake up day 5, and so, well, day 4 though, we had cut some tracks. I don't think we even saw a bear on day 4. The weather was just starting to kind of let up a little bit on day 4, and but we ended up seeing a mama bear and 2 cubs. That was just by accident. Like, we're just going through the woods, and we're actually working our way back to camp, and we weren't even on a track or anything. We're just going through the woods, and next thing I know, we just stop, and they're like, oh, and we look, and there was a mama bear with 2 little cubs, and they were coming up out of hibernation, is what they said. Because there were no tracks at all of this mama bear and 2 cubs. Like, they're literally just waking up, and they're deciding to get out for the first time. And so they're basically by this tree. What they don't really I never saw any dens. What I did see is, and I did get pictures. There's a lot of things I wish I had documented that I didn't. But what they would do is they would find, like, these trees. Sometimes there'd be like a whole mixture of trees together, and they would just kind of like dig a small hole, like large enough for their body, basically, kind of in the midst of these trees. and that's where they would just hibernate. And I guess they just let the snow blow over top of them, and then maybe dig a hole out in the midst of the snow. I don't know, but
Huh.
that's what we were seeing whenever we would see, like he'd point like, and he would say bed or sleep or something. Like basically that's where they hibernate. So I'm like, oh, okay, wow, that's cool. Like it wasn't a cave or a den like you'd think of. Um, and so that's what this mama bear and her two cubs, and we figured they were just getting up out of hibernation, and we were sitting there filming it. And again, we're like there 35, 40 yards, and you hear all these stories of like mama bears and cubs, like you better stay away from them, and I'm like, and I'm looking, and everybody's got their phones out filming, and I'm like, and of course I got my phone out filming too, and I actually did document that. But we're sitting there, and I'm like, wait a second, nobody's got a gun. Like, what if Mama Bear decides to charge us and thinks we're a threat to her cubs? And but luckily she didn't, and she just walked off on her way, and we just filmed her just walking off on her way. And dude, that was again, it's part of the experience.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many cool things that I got to see and encounter that I'm not going to ever get to see in Kansas.
Oh yeah.
Um, and all of that stuff. And that's what I was telling Dean. I said, I'm kind of glad that we had bad weather for the first 3.5 days because it made it hard for us to find bears just because, and that's what he told us. He said it's going to be rough because whenever the weather's bad, typically they like to bed up and sleep. And it's like a human being. They'll look out the window and be like, it's raining today. I'm just going to go back to bed. So one, you're not going to see a lot of bears because they're sleeping. And two, you're not going to see a lot of tracks because they're sleeping. So he told us it's going to be rough. But like I told him, I said, I'm kind of glad the weather was bad for the first 3.5 days because look at everything else that we got to experience.
Yeah.
Like, now, granted, I would have been bummed had I not killed one. Don't get me wrong, like I would have been bummed. I'd rather kill on day one rather than never kill at all. Like I
Right.
still want to have success because you're spending that kind of money. It's like you kind of want to come home with something, more than just what you bought at the airport.
Yeah.
So anyways, we saw the mama bear, two cubs, and we were leaving them, and we're just passing. We let them walk off on their way, then we're leaving them, and in the midst, we were probably 800 to 1,000 yards kind of headed back to camp. And again, we're still probably, I don't know, we're probably an hour and a half away from camp. But sure enough, we cut some big tracks, and we're literally 800 to 1,000 yards away from where we just saw the mama bear and her two cubs. And so we're getting on these tracks, and we're trying to get on them. But then he's like, look, and he's like, we don't have time. Like we're starting to lose light. He's like, there's no way we have time to go after this bear and still make it back before we lose light. And they're not wanting to get stuck out here in the dark either.
Right.
And so it's like morning we come back. Morning we come back. It's like okay. So we get back to camp, and then we end up eating dinner that night. And we were talking, and he was saying like basically we're gonna kill that bear. Like, and I knew this too. Like, so maybe a lot of people don't know this, but the big males, the big boars, they will actually kill the cubs, and they'll kill the cubs because then when they kill the cubs, the mama bear, the sow, will come back into heat, and then they're able to breed her again. So if her cubs are still alive, the mama bear's not in, she won't be in heat that at all that year.
Yeah.
She'll raise those cubs, like that's her job. She'll raise those cubs. She's not in heat again. But and again, those big males, those big boars will come in there and they'll kill the cubs. And then that way, it's just nature's way of repopulating itself. She'll automatically come back into heat again, and then he's able to breed her. So he's like, we're killing that bear. Like tomorrow we kill bear. Like he's like, no, he'll kill cubs. No, we're gonna let cubs live. We kill that bear. Like he was dead set. Let's kill this bear. I'm like, dude, I'm all for it. Like, let's
Yeah,
go.
let's
Like,
go.
I don't care. Like, let's go. Like, you tell me, let's go. So I don't care if he's 8-footer, 10-footer. I don't care. Let's go. Like, I'm on board with you. Like, yeah, just seeing those cubs, like it was, dude, it was so cool. I wish I had my big picture camera because I had a calendar moment where literally the two cubs were underneath of her. And literally, Mama Bear looks at me, and both cubs look up at us. And I'm like, "Oh, dude, there's my moment where I can snap some pictures." And that, dude, that's your calendar shot. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it was the coolest thing. So sure enough, we wake up next morning. It's like, and he points in the direction of where we saw the Mama Bear and where we saw those tracks. It's like, we kill bear. We kill bear. I'm like, dude, I'm on board. I already told you, let's go.
Yeah.
So sure enough, we head on out, and on the midst, and we still had a ways to go to get there, but so on the way out there, we end up seeing a fox, and I did get footage of him. I got my phone out real quick and filmed him. Again, it looks like the same fox that we have here in the States. And so I was like, this is cool. And so we just sat there, and everybody stopped for it. And again, they're no different than us. Like they're still, and they're out there in these woods every day, but it's like they're still just soaking up nature.
Yeah.
So sure enough, we see this fox, and everybody stopped. All four snowmobiles stop, and everybody gets their phones out. It's like, dude, we're all the same, even though we're from different parts of the world, we speak different languages. It's like these are my people. You know what I'm saying? Like they love nature just as much as I love nature. They want to see the mama bear and the cubs just as much as I do. They want to see this fox just as much as I do. And again, no bullets are flying, no arrows are flying. We're not killing anything. We're just enjoying the moment. We're just living in the moment and just the experience, you know. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is cool. Like this is where I'm at. And there was something about day 5 that I'm just like, I just felt at peace. I think even if I didn't kill one, I was just like, you know what? Even if I don't kill one, like this has been the coolest trip ever. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm coming back, regardless, I'm coming back. You know, like this has been a blast. And um, so we left the Fox, we're going back, and sure enough, we ended up cutting tracks, and we got back on the tracks where we last saw him, or last not saw him, but last where we saw his tracks, where we left his tracks the night before. And so the same thing, we're on the tracks and we're whizzing in and out of the trees, and we get to some open spots and we're going through some more trees again. We get we're crossing creeks, we're building bridges, and again I'm just sitting there, I'm just like, this is cool. Like now the adrenaline isn't as much as it was on day 1, as the first 3 days, you know, but now it's just like this is cool. Like we're stopping, now it's building a bridge. And so I get my phone out and they're building a bridge and I'm filming them build a bridge, you know, and so we got across this creek and then we built another one. So it was all of this was cool. So sure enough, we end up getting on the tracks, and probably it was probably 45 minutes to an hour of being on the tracks. And sure enough, we get to a part where, you know, we're looking up and he's probably 200 yards ahead and he doesn't know we're here. And sure enough, we come up over and he's kind of down this, I don't know, I wouldn't really say it was a canyon, but it was just like a long strip with no trees. It was maybe it's like a small ditch or something in between kind
Yeah.
of some hillsides. And it's like, oh wow, there he is. Like he's right up there. And so we all just, you know, everybody just stops and shuts snowmobiles off, and we're just sitting there. They pull up the binoculars and they're looking at him like, okay, is he a big one? You know, whatever. And sure enough, they're like, shooter. And when they so keep in mind, by this point now we had seen quite a few bears now because the weather had started letting up, and so we had seen quite a few bears. We had a point where we glassed the day before. We did see some bears on day 4. But they were smaller bears and they wanted 9 foot plus is what they're going for, you know. And so by this point we had seen quite a few bears, and so I'm just like, I'm not getting my hopes up. I'm just like, this is cool. Like that's a big bear. I don't know how, you know, I don't know if he's an 8 footer or a 9 footer or what he is, but it's a big bear to me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so I'm just soaking, like that's cool. But then all of a sudden, you know, there after a little bit of just looking at him, they're like, he looks at me, he says, big bear, shooter, shooter. And I was like, okay. Okay. So now my heart's in it, like now my heart's racing. It's like, okay, it's go time. It's go time. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, you tell me what we're doing, you know? And so they're like, you get back to the sled, you know, so they're pointing back to the sled. So I go back to the sled where my bow is. So I get on the sled with my bow. Basically what they do is then I'm on the sled, and we take a big loop around this sucker. They, again, all these guys, they all have GPSs on their snowmobiles, and they know this country like the back of their hand. So we're taking a big loop around this sucker, and I'm like, okay, I think I know what's happening. Like we're making a big loop around because we saw, you know, as we were watching for a while, we saw the kind of the general direction that he's already headed on his own, you know. So we make a big loop around, and I don't know how far we went. I bet, oh, we went a ways. End up getting somewhere in front of the bear, shut the snowmobile off, end up walking in there, getting in some trees, getting by a tree, whatever, finding a good location. And I'm assuming what the other 2 guys on the snowmobiles were doing, that was just kind of just slowly easing in. They've got radio. So they were radio. I don't speak Russian, so I don't know what was happening. I don't know what was happening. But I'm assuming they were probably bumping that bear to us just slowly, but they didn't want him to run because these suckers could run. I bet they were going, I bet they could go 30 miles an hour. I mean,
Oh yeah.
they could flat haul. So you definitely don't want to pressure this sucker and get the sucker running where you know, there's no way I could pull this off with a bow if they're running that fast. So long story short, we're sitting there and you're just waiting. It's like, and you're looking through the trees, and it's like, you know, he's here. Like you've done seen him, you know, he's here, and you know, he was headed in the direction that we have now got in front of him. And so at some point he's going to show up. Now, I don't know where, you know, and then sure enough, you end up seeing him come through the trees, and now it's like, and now your heart's racing again. Like it's like, and now I've got my bow in my hands and arrows knocked like this, and I'm the one shooting now. It's not Dean anymore, it's me. And it's like, this might go down. Like this might actually go
Yeah.
down. Like, and so you can run a million thoughts through your head all at once. And sure enough, the sucker's coming in, and it ended up being a 10-yard quarter away shot. Smoked him. He goes 15 yards and just piles up. And I'm just like, it just, I'll be honest, it still doesn't feel real. Like
Yeah.
I don't think it's still going to register until he's standing up in my house. Like it was number one on my list. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like this stuff doesn't happen. I'm a kid from a small town in Kansas. I grew up in a small town of 500 people. I graduated with like 12 kids. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like this stuff doesn't, it's not supposed to happen to me. You know,
Right.
I didn't grow up in a rich family. I didn't, you know what I'm saying? I'm just like it was a culmination of events and of crossing bridges and snow bridges and hand built bridges and fixing so many different parts on snowmobiles and getting stuck in rivers. Yeah, we got stuck in the river one time, and so we got to get like 100 feet of rope, and we're getting these pulling these snowmobiles out of the river. And I mean, like literally, all of these thoughts are just going through my head, and I'm like, I I'm just like I was all like literally I was already happy with if just going home empty handed. Like because I had experienced all of this stuff and I'm like, I did it. I actually did it. Like
Yeah.
I don't even know how to process what's happening right now. Like, and there he is laying there, like hands down, take my money. I'm going again. No question. Best
Wow.
adventure to date.
Holy cow, man. So 10 yards, he runs 15 yards. You talked about him coming through the trees. How far was he when you first saw him? And did he know y'all were there? Were you just that close to where he was walking?
So I don't know. I don't think he knew where we were. So when I first saw him, he was probably so there was a lot of thick. And I don't know what kind of trees they are. They look like aspen trees. They look like they had. I mean, they had all kinds of different trees. But the ones where I ended up shooting him, and this is where the picture is. That's where he laid. They look like aspen trees like you'd see in Colorado. I don't know what kind of tree they are, but they look like aspen trees. So they had those aspen trees. But before that, there was a lot of these little it almost looks like buckbrush. I mean, we call it like buckbrush. You're like just a lot of little trees that are all stacked together, so you couldn't really see. You couldn't have shot through it. There's no way you could have shot an arrow through it. Probably not. It wouldn't even be good to shoot a rifle through it. But that's where he ended up coming through. And so we're sitting there, and I've got a guy with a gun there with me, and we're sitting there, and I'm looking, and excuse me, and you hear some snow crunch. And it's like, and so now it's like, and I'm like, bear, like there he is. But he's in the thick stuff where it's like there's no way we could shoot him. And sure enough, he ends up getting out of the thick stuff, and now we're kind of in like these aspen trees that are spread out more, a little further from each other. And it's like, okay, I mean, clearly this is where we're going to shoot him, and that's where we were set up for. And and he looked at us, and I don't know if I don't. I'm guessing he knew we were there. I don't know. But at this point, it's like, here we are.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if they weren't. See, but again, the mama bear. See, we were really close to the mama bear. We were really close to another bear that was an 8-footer. I don't think they see a lot of people. I don't think they're that. I just don't think they're afraid of you.
Huh.
Like, I don't think they care.
Yeah.
And again, you got to keep in mind they don't have any predators. You know what
True.
I'm saying? Like, who's going to eat them? It's not like they're a little rabbit, and it's like, oh
Oh
man,
yeah.
I've got to be constantly looking out for my life.
No,
So
they're
I mean, he
top of
looked
the
at
food
us and he
chain.
saw us.
Yeah.
Like, and the snowmobile's not too far from us. It's like you can clearly see the red snowmobile. Like, if you can't see us in camo, you can surely see the red snowmobile. Like, so he had to have seen us. I just don't know if he just didn't care or what, and then just kind of just walked on past and quartered away 10 yards. Like, that was easy. Like, after seeing Dean's ordeal with the bear charges, like, it was almost like God's like, here you go. And like I said, maybe he was on the tail end of dying. I don't know. Maybe it's just an old bear. He's like, yeah, I was gonna die this year anyways. It was a rough winter, and I don't know. I don't
Wow.
know.
Oh
So
man.
it was, and the worst part about the whole thing, and this is just a kick in the nuts. Like, so I love filming everything and doing big films, whatever. Now we got some footage on a cell phone. It was filmed on a cell phone. We'll see what we can. I haven't even looked at the footage yet. I've imported it all into my computer. Um, but when I looked, I saw that it was being filmed with a cell phone, and I was just like, did we not get my big camera out? Like, why have we been hauling this tripod and my big camera around everywhere we go if we weren't? They knew I wanted this filmed, and it was already talked about which one of the guys was going to film it. and
Yeah.
and but again, I got lost in the moment. Like, it was partly my fault. I got lost in the moment too, because it's like there he is, and I'm not thinking film. And then after it happens, then I'm looking and I'm like, where's the big camera? Where's the big camera and tripod? Like, we had time to do that. We could have done this. We could have pulled this off. But here's
Yeah.
what I got is the phone. I see the guy holding the phone. I'm like, is that it? Is that it? But so then I had to, I'll be honest, I had to have a moment there where I sat there and I'm like, you know what? Like, I can't let the fact that this this may not be the best footage, or it may not even be good footage at all. Like I don't know. I said, I
Right.
can't let that ruin the entire experience. Like this, so I have to get over, like, as much as I was bummed that we didn't film it, like there was so much emotions. Like I still can't process them. Like, and here we are weeks later, what, like not a month, oh yeah, maybe close to a month. Yeah, probably a month after I shot him. But like there were so many emotions of there was some sadness of no film. No, like that's what I'm saying. Like no film, and they're like, oh, and then now they're realizing too, like, oh yeah, we forgot to get the big camera. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like, but again, these guys are Russian outfitters. Like, they don't film. That's not what they do. Their job
Right.
is to get you on a big bear, and they did their job. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I'm like, at the end of the day, they did their job. Like, so I can't, so
Man,
I'm
I
like, I
know
can't let that ruin this moment.
yeah, I know the exact feeling that you have, and I'm not trying like I don't know if any experience would compare to the story that you just told and the experience you just had, but it, I mentioned before we started recording that last year I had the opportunity to go to Colorado on my first ever mule deer hunt, and I'm bow only too, so I'm doing it archery in flat country,
Yep.
spot and stalk, and same deal when it came down to it and down to this pretty complicated stalk to try to make a move on this buck. It was like my help, the other guys that could have filmed it, they're every bit of a half mile away, if not longer.
Yeah.
So they're not really set up for it. I have a bow mounted camera that is in my bag on my back that I completely forgot about until after I got done.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I know the feeling, right? You make the shot and your excitement, and as everything starts coming down, you're like, oh man, I could have done that. I could have gotten it on film.
Right.
But you're 100% right. You can't let it ruin the moment because yeah,
No.
that is it's everything that you dreamed of, and
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
footage
Well,
is a
yeah.
bonus, but the experience you can't match it.
No, no. Well, and it was funny too later, I thought, because there were so many moments throughout that I didn't film. Like I said, the snow bridges, the bear charging us, the bear standing up, like there's so much that I didn't capture. And and maybe you've seen that meme, but there's a memes, and I'm not a golfer, but there's this meme out there of this guy standing. I'm guessing it's like at the Masters, and everybody around this guy is like got their phones out, and there's this one guy like right in the middle of the picture. He's sitting there with his arms crossed, holding the beer in his hands, and he's just watching it, no phone out. He is just fully soaking up the experience, and he's just logging it all right
Yes.
here. Whereas other people, they're worried about, am I getting good footage, and they're doing this number. They're going back and forth between the phone and the guy, and the phone and the golfer, but this guy, he's just like 100%.
Just
He's
there.
he's logging it all up here.
Yeah.
Yep. And I thought, you know what, like, screw it. I don't care if nobody else sees some of the stuff that I saw. I've got it up here,
Yeah. I
and
was
I
there.
can
I
pull those out of
experienced
the
it. Yeah.
archives anytime I want. Yeah, like it was my hunt, and screw it. Like, if I wasn't able to share everything about this, and you never are anyways. Like, there's so much, even the stuff where I got the camera out 90% of the time, there's still even things that you don't capture because the bird flew in, and before you get the camera out and hit record, then the bird flew off, or just little things that you just there's no way you could capture it all. And so again, it's just you're just making a mental note of those, and you're just logging those in the archives. And yeah, I mean, I'll screw it. I'll be able to pull those out for as long as I live. I'll pull those out. Now, that brown bear standing up, I can still see it today in my mind just as clear as it was. I
Yeah.
mean, and I'll pull it out every so often, like, man, that was really cool. Like when that bear stood up, that was, man, when that bear was charging, when I heard it ricochet, oh my gosh, that was scary.
Yeah.
Like, screw it. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we do it. Like, that's why we do it.
100%. I couldn't agree more. How big did your bear end up being?
So we didn't actually put a tape on him, but I know what my wingspan is. So we had him laid out. In fact, later they put him up on boards, and they stood him up, and we got pictures with the big volcano in the background. So I stretched my arms out there, and I don't know if they just didn't carry a tape measure or what. But I stretched my arms out there. I'm like, okay, and then I leave the one hand there, and then I walk and I mark it, and then I stretch out again. I'm like, okay, how much further is it to go? It's about this far, and And so then I go the other way from the nose to the tail is how they measure them, you know, from the one hand across to the other hand, and then from the nose to the tail. And so then I did that, and I'm like, he's something over 9 foot. I don't know what exactly, but he's somewhere over 9 foot.
Wow.
So I don't know if he's 9'3". I don't know if he's 9'6", you know, because then you got to divide them by two. And so I'm just ballparking. He's over 9. That's what I know. He's somewhere over 9.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. And you mentioned having him standing in your room there, so you're getting a full body mount, I guess.
that's the plan. We'll see. So it's expensive. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and I've got the money to do it right now. Well, I won't after I place this next bulk order of clothing. Um, so this clothing thing has taken a lot of money. Like
Yeah.
it has depleted the funds. Like I said, we were in a position to buy some land, and now we're not. So they can just give you an idea. It took a lot of money to start this. And I really don't want to. I really want this clothing thing to take off. Like, because I have thoroughly enjoyed the whole process of this clothing stuff. And I'm like, man, I'd love to do this full time. Like, it'd be a lot of fun. So I really want to see that succeed. And so I'm not going to, I've got time. I've still got quite a bit of time. I'm hoping that clothing sales will go phenomenal this fall. So we launched it in like January, and right now is literally the worst time to sell clothing. But even then, we've sold out a lot of the larger sizes, and so I know that's hurt me too because I know that I've had a lot of guys ask me like, "Hey, when are you going to get the large puffy jackets? And when are you going to get the extra large puffy jackets?" And it's like, well, probably been July. Like that's right now. We're hoping that's the turnaround time right now in the factory. And we're still figuring that stuff out as far as what that looks like and timeframes to you know, get product back at, back in restock. And when do we order? When do we order when we're down to 3 jackets? Do we restock then, or do we order when we're down to 20 or, so
Right.
just trying to figure out, the logistics of all that and when we reorder stuff and restock. But, so yeah, I've got time. I'm probably going to have a year before I have to make the decision of, am I doing a full body mount? I want to do a full body mount.
Oh yeah.
I would like to, but you're looking at $7,000 for a full
Yeah.
body mount.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, I mean, and that's, realistically, I could use that $7,000 to develop probably at least 2, if not maybe 3 more pieces to the clothing line. That could be 3 more jackets, 3 new SKUs that we're adding. And I'm like, man, I'd really like, so we'll see where we're at financially,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I want to do a full body mount. I do, but at the same token, like I told my wife, I said, man, I want to go back because I've seen a 10-footer. I've seen a 10-foot bear, and I know how big those are.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, if I'm gonna have one standing up, do you want the 9-footer or do you want the 10-footer? I want the
Yeah.
10-footer,
Yeah.
So Lord willing, I want to go back again. And my visa is good for 3 years. So Lord willing, hopefully I can go back here. And like I said, I've just gotta buckle down and get this clothing line, and hopefully it does well and it takes off and get some money start coming in again. And yeah, hopefully I can go again here soon and hopefully shoot a 10-footer, and then yeah, it'll make my decision a lot easier. But
Yeah. For sure. Did you get to eat any of it?
so no, so there's an old trapper there, boy, and I posted a picture of that guy. That guy lives there year round.
Wow.
Like, and it's funny because now he kind of helped, like, so he was like in charge of like cutting wood and keeping the fire going, and making sure we never ran out of heat, whatever. But so he had some jobs while we were there, and so he did some work, and I don't know what they pay him. But yeah, he lives there year round, and it's funny because Dean gave him a tip, and I'm like, Dean, what's he gonna do with that? Like, and it's American money, keep in mind. It wasn't even Russian, but it's like, Dean, what? Like, I don't think that guy uses money. I really, because he literally lives off the land back there. Like,
Yeah.
that's where the dude lives. He doesn't go into town. I didn't see any vehicles out there. And well, there weren't any vehicles anyways because we took snowmobiles. Now
Yeah.
he had some ratty tatty. I don't know if they worked. There were a couple snowmobiles that I think were his. Dude, they were rough. Like, I could send you a picture. I don't think I posted those. I need to post those. There were 2 snowmobiles that were, I mean, like bare bones, and I'm like, I think that's what the dude goes around on. Like,
Yeah.
he checks his traps. Like, this is what the dude gets around on. He ain't going into town. Like, he doesn't have a vehicle. This is
Right.
this is. I mean,
This
as
is
rough as
his
you
life.
get, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Dean gave him like $100 tip or something. I'm like, Dean, what's he gonna do with that? And says he'll probably roll it up and smoke it. That's what I told him, because he was smoking a cigarette, or I say cigarette, it smelled like a cigar. It smelled like a cigar. I don't know what he was smoking, but it smelled like a cigar. But when I looked at this thing and I was like, "Do you mind if I take a picture?" And he's like, "Oh, you know," I was like, I'm taking, I'd do it either way. I'm taking a picture of you because you're just unique." And but he rolled this, it looked like newspaper or like something from a book, like just paper. He rolled it himself, you know.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if he's got like back tobacco growing out there somewhere and he harvests it before the winter and I don't know. But he rolls his own stuff, and that's why I told Dean. I said he's probably gonna take that $100 bill and he's probably gonna smoke it. You like, what are you doing to give him $100 American bill? You know, he ain't gonna know what to do with that. So yeah.
But so I guess you gave him some of the meat and everything that you had.
Oh yeah. Oh sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah. So it would have been with him and then some of the locals because again, there's a lot of people there that they just don't have much, man.
Yeah.
Like literally they don't have much. It's a third world country and I mean it definitely makes you appreciate what you have back home. You know,
Yeah.
and man, I don't even want to get all political, but there's a lot of people that think our country sucks and it's like people, do you have any clue what other countries are like? Like you have no clue, man.
Yeah.
Like we have it amazing in America. Um so yeah, it's again, it's all part of the experience, and it's there's so much involved in it. Not just the fact, and that's something else too. Like hunters' dollars are coming into these poverty-stricken areas, and it's like you realize how many tens of thousands of dollars this hunt's going for, and this money is being dispersed amongst these people. Like this is helping their economy.
Right.
Like hunters are bringing in big amounts of money to these people and sharing this with these people.
Yeah.
Like yeah, I mean it's not like we're just a bunch of rednecks that drink beer and kill crap. You know what I'm saying? Like
No, we're
there's so much
supporting
more to
a
the hunter.
economy in that sense. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like I mean, and you see it too with, and you know this. I mean, with Africa, like people that go to Africa and hunt, that's on my bucket list too. There's a bunch of animals I want to kill over there. Obviously, the African lion, um, but the amount of money that that generates for those locals,
Yeah.
and then obviously the meat gets donated. So the red tape, you know, to bring a lot of that meat back from whenever you're dealing with international stuff. And now, if you're going to Alaska, it's a lot easier to bring obviously meat back because you're in the U.S. It's, you know, you shoot a moose in Alaska, there's no red tape to jump through because you're
Right.
going right back to the States. But whenever you're transporting meat, because they're worried about diseases and all kinds of stuff like that, there's so much red tape that you've got to jump through or hoops, and then you can't even bring that much back. It's like it's not even worth it. So when I was in New Zealand, I forgot how much. I want to say it was like 50 pounds tops, I think. Don't hold me to that. Don't quote me on that. But I just remember thinking because I'm like, man, I want to bring this back home. Like this would be cool. Like I want to share this with my family. Like we've never had red stag, you know, or and now I end up having red stag obviously when I was there, but my family has. I'm like, I want to share this with them and my boys. I want them to have some of the red stag that I shot and the fallow deer and so I was like, and of course then the outfitter's like, well, you can only take this much back, and then you've got to fill out paperwork and you've got to pay some money, and it's like, oh crap, well, it's not even worth it then, you know?
Yeah.
So then what happens is you just donate it to the local people, you know? So there's a lot of these people that are benefiting not just financially, but even just sustenance, you know, just the food itself.
Yeah.
Um, and that's and there's and maybe we as hunters too maybe need to do a better job of telling the story of those situations, I guess. Because yeah, there's a lot of people that don't know that that's what's happening with it. It's not like we're just rednecks just going out and killing crap, you know, and drinking beer. Although they
Right.
did like their vodka, they did like their vodka.
Yeah, I imagine
But
so. Classic.
oh my goodness, that's we ain't got time. We could go for another hour probably. Oh my goodness, there's so much to unpack. So much to unpack.
Well, man, you tell the story very, very well. And you know, it's been awesome to talk to you about it and to just hear on the video your excitement, you know, reliving it yet again, as I'm sure you already have done 100 times, you know, since you've been
Yeah.
back. But yeah, there's something special about these kind of experiences, man, and you had one heck of one. There's no doubt about that.
Yep. So when are you going? When are you going?
I don't know. It might be a little sooner than it was before we started talking a couple hours ago, you know. So no, you got me intrigued for sure. I'll have to think about it. And then start working on the wife.
Well, at
We'll
some
start
point, so
tonight.
whenever I go back, there's a good chance I may take a group of guys back with me.
Yeah.
And that's why I told my wife, I said, you know, because I got a lot of messages, you know, just through Instagram and guys telling me like, oh man, I'd love to do that someday, but I probably never will. And I'm like, why are you selling yourself? like I'm disheartened by these messages because I'm like, why are you selling yourself short? Why are you saying that you probably never will? Like if you know, and I had a teacher when I was in school, they this is a quote, and they probably stole a quote from somebody else, but they've told me, you maybe have heard it. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right.
That's true.
Like
I like that.
if you think you can, you're probably right. If you think you can't, you're probably right.
Yeah.
Like the only limitations we have are the limitations we put on ourselves. And I get these, and so I get these messages, and I was telling my wife, I said, you know what, I need to do something. Like I need to start letting these guys know that it's possible. Like even if I need to like set up like a group hunt and say, listen, who, you know, and start small, start with, because there's a lot of whitetail hunters that have never been in the mountains and never gone on an elk hunt, you know, done the whole packing in and done that, you know, whatever. And so maybe just start with something like that. Like, listen, how many of you have not been on an elk hunt yet where you pack in and do that whole deal? Is that something you want to do? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, man, yeah, I want to do it. I'll probably do it. Okay, let's do it. And I'm
Yeah.
going to go with, like, I'm taking you with me. Like, let's just go.
No,
Like, and so that's why I
that's
told her, I said, I
awesome.
need to, like, maybe start doing some of these.
That's awesome, man. Yeah,
So,
I agree. This year actually, I'm hoping to get to do just that, the backcountry elk hunt. I've never elk hunted
yeah,
before. And again,
yeah,
one of those deals where you set your mind to it and you decide that you're going to do it.
yeah.
And I find out here actually in a couple weeks if I got my tag or not. So
Well,
fingers
and
crossed.
if you
But
don't draw, there's plenty of over-the-counter tags that you
I
can
know,
get in
yeah.
different areas. Like,
And
don't, you know what I'm saying? Just because you don't draw, like, well, I didn't draw my tag, so I guess I can't go. No, just get and go, man. Like, you're gonna find out the first year, anyways, is gonna be pretty much a scouting trip.
yeah,
The chances of having, unless you go with an outfitter and pay the money, but for the most part, if you're going on your own to do it yourself deal, the first year is pretty much going to be a scouting trip. It's just going to be learning the area. The success rate is going to be extremely low. So, not to say you can't get lucky, but for the most part, it's going to be a scouting trip, and you're going to figure out where the elk are and where the elk aren't. And
right,
then so that way, when you go next year, you have a better idea. It's like, okay, we know which canyon to go to, and we'll just start right there when we get there. And again, I got these memories logged. Like I'll never forget. Another moment I won't forget is the first night I sat in a tent. And again, this is a trip that I'd always talked about. Man, I'd love to do one of them trips where I go because I'm from Kansas, you know, so I don't live in the mountains. But like, man, I'd love to go where I pack back in the mountains and sleep in the tent and do the whole deal, you know. And I'll never forget the first time that I was sleeping in a tent that first night. And it was me and a cameraman, and we're sitting there and we're like, dude, we're doing it. We're like a couple of schoolgirls just like giggling. It's like, dude, we're here, you know. And we're just sleeping in the tent with the stars above us. It's like, here we are, we're packed back in, you know, 2, 3, 6. I don't know how far we were. We went and we had to pack back out. We packed back in several different times in different areas, but just trying to find out. Like I said, it's going to be a learning curve the first trip.
yeah,
But just that first night, it's like, dude, we're doing it. We're actually doing it. Like this is the thing we've talked about. And now here we are actually doing it. And that in and of itself is empowering. And it's like, dude, there's nothing I can't do. Like set your mind on something and go for it. And once you find out that you can actually do it, again, it's about finding those limits. You'll start to realize you start to wonder, do I even have any limits? Like, dude, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done, and the more you start putting under your belt, it's like, well, how far can I go? Like I don't think there's anything I can't do.
yeah.
It's empowering. It's really empowering. And you just got to push those limits, man. You do it. I don't care if you draw a tag or not. I'm gonna hold you to it. I'm gonna send you a message here in what is it? I'm gonna send you a message here in a couple months. I'm like, so where are you going? Where are you going? I don't care if you drew a tag or not. Where are you going?
Fair enough.
You gotta go. You gotta do it.
Fair enough. Well, Brett, you're inspiring, man, and I really appreciate you coming on our show and sharing this incredible story, and then going the extra mile too, and inspiring others and everything. It's been awesome.
Well, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Real quick, just as we wrap up the podcast itself, tell folks where they can find you.
Oh, yeah. So Backcountry Bowhunter is my personal Instagram account. You just look up Backcountry Bowhunter, all one word. And then the clothing line is Goat Gear. And the tag for that, I guess the handle for that for Instagram is Goat Gear Outdoors. And you can find the clothing line on there. And the website is goatgearoutdoors.com.
Awesome. Well, guys, go check out everything that Brett's got going on and follow along the content, the photos, and everything that I've seen so far from the bear hunt itself, like we talked about here tonight. Incredible content. You do a great job with that stuff, man. And
Thank you.
yeah, go check out everything he's got going on. Follow along with the journey. Be sure that you're following Fall Obsession as well on all of our major social media platforms. Subscribe to the podcast. And with that, we're signing off for this episode. I'll be back with you guys again next week for another podcast. Catch you then.